This is Frank Morano on Talk Radio 1071 and on WABCRadio.com. Well, one of my favorite people to talk to when it comes to military affairs is Colonel Daniel Davis. Not only has he been a decorated colonel in the United States Army, serving 21 years of active service, but he is the definition of a warrior and a scholar. He is a senior fellow and military expert for defense priorities, and he is the author of the new book, The 11th Hour in 2020 America. He joins us again, my favorite person to talk to when it comes to military affairs right now. Colonel Davis, thanks so much for joining me on the radio this morning.
Thanks a lot for having me. I'm always happy to be on your show.
So, Colonel, when we left our last conversation on Veterans Day, we were talking about the situation in Afghanistan. We're hearing some encouraging news now out of the administration that the Trump administration is preparing to withdraw troops from not only Afghanistan, but Iraq and Somalia. What are we hearing? What do we know for a fact? And how are we feeling about what we're hearing?
Well, we're certainly hearing lots of reports from a number of credible sources. Many of them, I'm hearing some stuff from some guys who have direct knowledge into these senior administration areas. This all corroborates what we're hearing, which is that President Trump is going to reduce the troop numbers in Afghanistan and Iraq down to 2,500 each before the end of January. And it's uncertain yet what he's going to do in Somalia. There's not that many there, so that would be a lot easier to draw down. But it's uncertain whether they're going to maintain or whether even the plan is to continue to maintain the ultimate complete drawdown, which was originally slated for May of 2021, so just this coming May. So if this is accelerating that up through then, because initially the original drawdown plan was going to be about 4,000, maybe 4,500 by January, and now he's going to have it 2,500. So hopefully that trend is going to continue, or at least he'll have plans put in place that would continue to either have it out by May or even earlier, which is certainly what I'm all for.
All right. Well, obviously, me too. Let me ask you about what some of the so-called experts are saying. In an article on this subject in The Hill, Mark Kansian, a former defense official who's now with a group called the Center for Strategic and International Studies, he basically said while it's not impossible that he would try some precipitous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the military could slow roll him on anything he directs. Now, that sentence that I read yesterday upset me more than anything that I've read this week because, one, to me, you shouldn't have unelected officials overruling the directives of the commander-in-chief. And number two, to call the longest war in American history and putting an end to it precipitous struck me as a little tone-deaf. What's your reaction when you hear stuff like that?
Well, I'll tell you, in this case, it's virtually identical to what you said, because even listening to you talk about it right now, I mean, my blood's starting to boil. Look, this is the commander-in-chief. I don't care if you hate Donald Trump. I don't care if you love him. He is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, according to the U.S. Constitution, with full authority. And senior military officials don't get the luxury. They don't have the privilege or the authority to question the orders. They don't get to say, maybe we'll do it, maybe we'll slow roll it. I mean, we've seen a lot of that already. Through the first 4 years of President Trump's term, I mean, he's had to fight that tooth and nail all the way through. And that's a big problem when you have senior military guys who take it upon themselves, just as you say, in a non-elected position, and start trying to either tell the president what he's going to do or just not obey. Because I'm here to tell you for a fact, not one of those guys would dare accept that from any of their subordinates. If they gave some order and some, say, lieutenant colonel, for example, decided, I'm going to slow roll the general's orders here because I don't think they're good, I'd be in front of a court martial faster, your head would spin. And now then they're doing the very thing they wouldn't allow, and I think it's just a big problem.
He's apparently not the only one saying that kind of thing. The former defense secretary, Mark Esper, apparently put out a memo warning that conditions have not been met for withdrawal from Afghanistan. This was a classified memo, but like everything in Washington, anything classified becomes public pretty quickly. This was sent out earlier this month, and I'm curious, have you seen the coverage of this Esper warning, and what do you think of his warnings about the withdrawal from Afghanistan?
Yeah, absolutely. I have seen those, and I also saw the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on the floor of the Senate yesterday evening saying a lot of the very same things. And I just cannot stress enough how desperately wrong these guys are. I mean, look, I've served in Afghanistan twice. I've been in the military. I was in the military for 21 years. I helped shut down overseas bases. I know logistically, explicitly in Afghanistan, how hard it is to do a lot of this stuff, and it is hard, but it's not impossible. And I don't care if it's hard. If the commander-in-chief gives an order, that's what we're going to do. But to say that the conditions haven't been met, which is very similar to the same thing that McConnell was saying tonight, that is wrong too, because, number one, there aren't any conditions listed. We have the current mission that we have there has basically two parts, which is to degrade al-Qaeda and ISIS and to train the militaries, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan. Well, look, those things are not militarily achievable missions. They have no criteria. I mean, what does it mean to target or go after al-Qaeda? You can literally do that for the next 100 years and never have any demonstrable impact on them. And here's the critical thing. This is something so important that I want to make sure everybody understands. We don't need troops on the ground in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Iraq, in Somalia, in Yemen at all to keep us safe here. It is a genuine requirement for us to provide security for the United States against any terrorist threat, no matter where it comes from. But we don't do that by having troops on the ground. We do that with our very powerful intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance effort and our ability to have targeted strikes anywhere in the world, and we are masters at that. So we are not going to increase the risk to our country by withdrawing. We actually increase the risk by staying.
I don't know that many Americans even fully understood that we had troops in Somalia. How many countries are there in the world right now where there are American military servicemen stationed?
But a lot of that's classified, and we can only guess and kind of put the puzzle pieces together. But there's at least, I think, close to a dozen places in the continent of Africa by itself. And then we do know specifically about Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya. Yeah, there's even some in Libya and Yemen and special forces, and certainly in Somalia. So we've got way too many out there, and on missions that really have nothing to do with American national security interest. And these things need to shut down for our security.
So, and if people just tuning in, we're talking with Colonel Daniel Davis. You can read some of his commentary at defensepriorities.org. That's defensepriorities.org. He's also the author of a book called The 11th Hour in 2020 America. Eventually, Colonel, I'm going to have to break down and buy a copy because my publisher's review copy has still not yet arrived. But that's okay. Happy to contribute to a good cause. Now, since Secretary Esper's firing, essentially, we've seen a new group come into the Pentagon, and I was just so fired up, so enthusiastic that one of the people that's now heading over to the Pentagon in a policy role is Colonel Douglas Macgregor, somebody that you and I both have a great deal of respect for, and somebody who himself has been a pretty fierce proponent of ending American involvement in Afghanistan. I guess my question is, as a Trump supporter, which I am, why has it taken until the last 3 months of his presidency to put in people like Colonel Douglas Macgregor? Why, even though Donald Trump has said a lot of the right things on Afghanistan and Syria, has this been a defense policy team that's been led by people like John Bolton and General Mattis and, H.R. McMaster? Why are we seeing this only at the very end of his administration?
Yeah, I got to tell you, that's just a head scratcher to me because, I've been saying for probably close to 2 years that nobody really understands the mind, I think, of the president than Doug Macgregor, and he could put into effect the president's instincts in great policy and in ways that succeed, in ways that help out the United States. And I think President Trump came to see that, but it's just a little bit too late, I suppose, because I'm thinking if he, it was rumored that he was going to get rid of Esper. I mean, back in, I think, July or August. I mean, quite a ways before the election. And I was thinking even then, and definitely even real stronger now, that if President Trump had taken this action earlier, I think it might have helped him get reelected,
I
because
completely
this is
agree.
news that so many people agree with.
Absolutely. So we're seeing some warnings from some Biden people, either formal members of his team or those in the orbit of his team, that say that this partial withdrawal could complicate some of the policy choices for Joe Biden once he takes over. How do you see the Biden team stepping into what the moves that Donald Trump is making here now?
Well, I mean, it's not surprising at all, because I'm sure that if they had, things the way they wanted, that President Trump would just go to ground and do nothing, and not change anything at all for the next however many 60 days it is. But President Trump, as he has correctly said a few times, is the president. He is currently the president. He didn't lose his power after the election, and he is obligated to do the right thing. Now, I do, like I just said, wish he had done this earlier, but he has done it. It is the right thing. It's always been the right thing, and I hope that he continues on to it. And frankly, Biden could benefit from this, because this could help him, undo a really kind of a thorny issue here, instead of just leaving it on his doorstep with no action.
Sure.
And President Trump could actually do him a favor by taking care of this before he gets on board.
Yeah. Do we know if the other NATO troops that are in Afghanistan and some of these other theaters will also be withdrawing, or will this be America alone withdrawing their troops from these places?
That stuff is going on right now. All those things are happening. We definitely would not just, literally leave them holding the bag here. So all this stuff is being coordinated at the highest levels. Whether they're happy about it or not, I think probably there's a mix. Probably some are, some aren't. But they are definitely being coordinated with. We're not doing this just on our own.
Well, it's certainly going to be an interesting thing to watch and see how the world reacts to this, and how the Biden administration, assuming there is one, reacts to it. Colonel Daniel Davis, it is always a real treat to be able to talk with you. Thank you, as always, for the time this morning.